Baltimore City Council Budget and Appropriations Committee. Our 1 p.m. session is going to be Department of Transportation. We have you scheduled from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. 3:30 p.m. Sorry. I believe we have you also coming in tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. For discussion on green infrastructure. And
Put my question in early. That's how I get to go first all the time, brother.
that should be it for DOT. Frank, if you could come up, we're going to ask that you keep your presentation to 15 to 20 minutes. I've been joined by Vice Chair of the Committee, Leon Pinkett from the 7th District, Councilman Robert Stokes from the 12th District, Councilman Ryan Dorsey from the 3rd District, Councilman Chris Burnett from the 8th District, Councilman Brandon Scott from the 2nd District, Vice President of the City Council, Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton from the 6th District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Marguerite Curran is staff to the committee, Karan Banks from the Mayor's Office. We are on request number 15. You may hear us reference requests for documentation starting with number 16 because we started incrementally at 1 at the beginning of the day. So that's the reason for that if you're scratching your head the first time we say number 16. We've also been joined by Councilman John Bullock from the 9th District. Frank, if you could quickly introduce your team, name and position, and then get into the briefing, and please try and keep it around 20 minutes, and then we will get into questions from the council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm Frank Murphy, Acting Director of Transportation. Got our 2 Deputy Directors, Lindsay Wines and Connor Scott, sitting next to me. In the back, we have our Division Chiefs and Deputy Division Chiefs, Graham Young from Traffic, Desmond Cole from Traffic Signals, Colby McFarland from the Transit Bureau, Colonel Yolanda Kaysen from Enforcement, Rob Liberati from our ATVES program, that's the Automated Traffic Violation Enforcement, and DK, our Fiscal Chief, Bamal, our Tech Chief, Transportation Engineering Construction, our Capital Program. The row behind, we have Michelle and Tim from the Permits, and in the back, Kenny Chang from Maintenance, Chief of Maintenance. So, without further ado, we are here, okay, street lighting, of course, that everybody kind of knows what that's about. We are going to be adding street lights and upgrading a number of our street lights that we haven't yet done to LEDs. Those are not paid for in this budget, but we will begin that work this year. Conduit management, this reflects the increase in conduit rental fees. Actually, it increased to 3 as a result of litigation. We have settled on a rate of 2, which is still an increase over previous years. Administration, of course, our office in the Benton building also includes some federal funds to support DOT's workforce development. This is program 3 years and provides participants with life-ready skills such as GEDs, high school diplomas, and the like. Street management, everybody kind of knows what that's about, including our in-house resurfacing program, footways, alleys. Traffic management, signs and markings, traffic signals. Reduction from fiscal 2017 is due to a baselining of utility costs, no impact to service. Special events. The service provides, we anticipate over 300 events in fiscal 2018, which is comparable to previous years. And you know about the big ones like Light City and Artscape, but there's a lot of smaller events like neighborhood block parties that we also service. Inner Harbor Services. Okay, we have been tracking citizens rating the Inner Harbor appearance as good or excellent through the Citizen Survey in 2015. 67% rated the Inner Harbor as excellent, good or excellent. There was not a survey done last year. Snow and ice control. We had less accumulation this past year, but a lot of the costs are the same. You know, it still costs you the same amount of money to service all the vehicles and we had a lot of deployments on weekends, which meant overtime spent. Vehicle impounding and disposal, basically our towing services. The city actually doesn't, this isn't a net cost of the city. We take in enough money to pay for it, but the money that comes in goes to the general fund and then has to be awarded in the budget process. Sustainable transportation, this is bike share and the circulator. This assumes maintaining the service on the circulator and an increase in bike share stations. As you probably know, we had 20-some stations up until just the last week or so. We've been increasing. We're looking to get up to about 50 this spring, early summer. And, you know, if increases beyond that, we don't know yet, but we certainly expect it to continue growing. It's been very successful. Public rights-of-way landscape management. This is mowing and the like. Bridge and culvert maintenance. There are 300 bridges. We aim to have 6% of the bridges under preventative maintenance during 2018. Parking enforcement. I don't think I have to explain that one too much. Service is expected to close 100% of parking complaint requests in time during fiscal 2018.
Frank, can you make sure you speak into the mic just 'cause
Oh,
it's
sure.
being
Sorry.
recorded? It's all right. Thank you.
Survey control, relatively small item. Dockmaster's office, another small item. Provides for the coordination of dockside activities and the docking of vessels in the inner harbor. This will maintain current levels of service. Street cuts management, something we've really been ramping up in recent years. Those folks came over from General Services, and we've been stepping up the tracking and making the contractors do the right thing. We anticipate 5% of street cuts will be determined to be improper during inspection. DOT is currently updating its street cut policy. That's true. Will make the utility companies a little more responsible for maintaining cuts in good condition and repairing them in a timely manner. Traffic safety, crossing guards, and safety education. Some of you may have come to our Safety City Day that was held in Druid Hill Park a month or so ago. Real property management. And I think that's it. Yep. Questions?
Sure. Let's go to Councilman Scott. We've been joined by Council President Young, Councilman Schleifer from the 5th District, and Councilman Ed Reisinger from the 10th District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Murphy, thank you for your service. This first question is actually for Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein, you know that the use of general funds to fund the circulator is a big problem, a big issue for me. Last year, I specifically asked if the city was going to continue to increase its general fund obligations to the circulator, and I was told that that would not be happening. However, as you can see in this budget this year, there is a $6 million increase in the general fund obligation to the circulator. While we understand that there was loss of some special funding, but at the same time, other organizations, other programs, Safe Streets, for example, after school, when their funding ran out, it simply just ran out. There was no big rush to give them a big general fund increase into the budget. And when we have people dying on our streets and we need safe places for our young people to go, when you have a bus system, despite what anybody will tell you, that solely operates in rich white neighborhoods in the city of Baltimore, no one can balance that out and no one can explain how we can do that when we're facing the situation that we're facing. So can you, for me, explain what funding was lost and what reasoning we are giving to increase the circulator funding by $6 million?
Thank you, Councilman. As you know, in the fiscal 17 budget, the previous administration had proposed an increase to the parking tax. Currently, the parking tax provides about $6 million which makes up a large portion of the budget for the circulator. When we could not get support for the parking tax increase, the previous administration was looking at making changes to the routes. This administration has decided not to take that course, and so it falls to the general fund to make up the difference. And that includes, I want to be clear, that includes beginning to pay down the accumulated deficit in the special fund. That deficit is actually part of the grants deficit that Director Raymond was talking about earlier that has become an audit issue for the city. It also includes funding for vehicle replacement. Now, we have been in the process of RFP reviewing proposals, but a new contract is on hold. We may be moving to a leasing model. I think that's our desire, but until we know for sure, we think the responsible thing to do is to begin setting aside funding for vehicle replacement. You mentioned safe streets. I told the council, I think you had asked the question at the hearing a few weeks ago. We are going to find funding for that. There's $12 million in this budget for additional youth programming, including after-school programming. So I don't think we have shortchanged safe streets or after-school funding in order to take on the circulator costs.
So just to follow up, Mr. Klein, let's be open and honest. Clearly, we are shortchanging safe streets and after school for the circulator if the circulator is in the budget and safe streets and after school are not in the budget. So we can't say that we're not shortchanging one for the other when one's in the budget, one is not. I know that this isn't your decision, and that I believe that if it were up to you, like me, you would say that people should pay for the circulator. But the point is that we can't look and see where Safe Streets is. We can't look and see where after school is in our budget books. However, we can look and see that this bus route that operates in specific neighborhoods in the city has a $6 million increase when the majority of the citizens who live and reside in Baltimore can't walk out their house and get on a free bus. We have to have some balance. And my second question, you said it, but you're talking about leasing. Who owns the buses now?
The city.
The city owns the buses. But they're not so are they under DOT's control, or because DGS told us that they didn't own any buses earlier?
Well, DOT controls, they're responsible for the buses and for the contract for operating the buses.
And how long before you go to the leasing?
Well, maybe DOT can talk about that. The new contract is on hold.
Councilman, we are in the process. We've already issued the RFP once, but we have to put it back out. The prior one expired, and with the new administration coming in, we're trying to incorporate any changes that they may want. Our goal is to shift to a lease model so that we don't have to worry about these debt or these bus replacement funds like we are right now. So whenever the new contract goes in effect, as our buses age out, we will switch in with the new leased buses.
I do want to point out that, leasing versus having a capital reserve for replacement, it's not as though leasing is free. So
right,
leasing will increase the operating cost of the system. We don't know how much until we see the bid. So the $3 million that we put in the budget for vehicle replacement, either it will be for vehicle replacement or it will be to cover the lease costs, which may or may not be $3 million. Hopefully it'll be less than that, but that's why the money's there.
And thank you. And lastly, I'd just like to say for my colleagues that if we say, for example, cut the $6 million increase in half, and that would make it to $3 million, or if we charge $1 for every rider, that would give us $3.5 million, which would almost fund a Safe Streets in all of 9 police districts. Thank you.
Mr. Klein, every year I struggle with this math with you, and I can't seem to figure it out. So service 690 on page 552 in volume 2 indicates that the circulator bus system is recommended for $15 million.
What page are you on? I'm sorry.
552.
552. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Expenditure by activity, line 1, circulator bus.
Yep.
Budgeted for 17, $15,586,133. Recommended for 18, $15,477,728. Okay? The system costs like $9 million to operate. We bring in $6 million in revenue from the parking tax. That was the 12 to 16 cent jump.
Yes,
And then we have a $3 million grant from the state.
that's right.
That equals $9 million. That covers the cost to operate the system. You insist that there is this $3 million deficit that needs to be paid back every year, and it's at 15 or 16 million in total, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Who is that? Because you've programmed that $3 million. I know DOT didn't do it. This is your budget, not theirs. You've programmed that $3 million. Explain to me, show me in these two budget books which line item that $3 million is going to.
Well, the 3 million is general fund dollars
Yep.
that will go to the special fund to begin paying down the accumulated deficit.
Show me where in this book that special fund is with that $3 million.
It's right at the bottom. You can see, so 9.2 million in special fund, and the 6 million from the general fund is up in the general fund line. You'll see it going from 1 million to 7 million.
Yeah, but where is the? I don't understand. What are you doing with that $3 million? What account are you paying back?
Special fund. Special fund has a deficit. If you look at the
But this
balance
was
sheet of
never
the special fund,
But
it
this
has a
wasn't-
deficit, and our auditors are telling us, you need to cure this deficit, or we can't give you a clean audit opinion.
But this has been funded out of general fund, right?
No, this has been funded out of special fund. This
That-
is the first year that we're funding it with general fund at all.
You're funding it out of. So you're taking the parking tax revenue that's coming in, the 6 million, and you're not putting it in the general fund. You're putting it in special fund, and
Right.
then expending it from
Yes.
special fund.
Yeah.
But you're putting the rest of the parking tax revenue that's coming in after parking management and parking enterprise, you're putting that in general fund,
Right.
yet you're splitting out 6 million for this and putting it in special fund.
Yes, that's correct.
No, that's right. Yeah, no, they're paying themselves back for something that they're,
back while they're,
yeah. Yeah, no, it is a shell game, Mr. President. Who's up next? Councilman, Mr. President?
Thank you. I want to go to volume 2 in the budget book, page 517. The performance measure table on page 517 include a metric percentage of citizens rating street lighting services as good or excellent. The historic number ranged from 48% to 61%. Yet the target for FY16 through FY18 is 75%. Is this target realistic?
Sorry, what was this? Sorry, Mr. President, I didn't hear the second part of your question.
On page 517, the matrix percentage of citizens rating street lighting services good or excellent. The historic number ranged from 48% to 61%, yet the target for FY16 through FY18 is 75%. Is this target realistic?
We believe it is. The number for fiscal 20, or actual for 2016, we don't actually really know what it was. There was no citizen survey done, so we had to use the most recent data, which was from 2015. That's why it's the same 48%. as fiscal 2015. So it may actually be higher. We believe with all of our installations that we've done in the high crime zones, with improved lighting, that we'll see that increase. And then now with the new Be More Bright initiative to increase the number of pedestrian lightings by 6,000, as well as converting all of our remaining street lights to LEDs, that we will see an improvement in citizen perception of our lighting services.
Okay, well, at the bottom of the same page, it lists increased payment related to Be More Bright within the amount of $3.8 million. Can you explain how this breaks down and relates to the lighting program? And what is the cost per pole, the cost of converting the existing light to LED, and the cost to maintain each lighting pole?
So the 3.8 is actually not all related to Be More Bright. Only 1.4 million of that is related to Be More Bright. The remaining,
much?
1.4. And that's for the first year of this program. The remaining part of that is actually was a build-in request that we made based on the street lighting tariff. So those were existing costs that we had already incurred but were not previously budgeted. So I just want to clarify that. And then in terms of the actual cost per pole, I'll have to get that information for you as follow-up. But in general,
To the committee, yeah.
but in general, with the costs that we've been seeing with the new LED fixtures, they're about $500. And we have warranties for 10 years, so if something happens to those lights, we don't pay anything to replace those over the course of 10 years.
Even if a car accident knocks the poles down?
The pole, usually the insurance is supposed to cover those costs.
Okay.
But it's different if someone, shoots the light out or something like that, but if there's an actual defect with the light, we don't have to buy a new fixture.
Okay. Well, if you all could let us know how many light poles that were damaged by car accidents and how many claims have we recovered from the insurance companies as it relates to that. And on page 520, on service 548, conduits. The performance measures on this page indicates 100% of conduit application will be reviewed within 72 hours of application. This service doesn't appear to have an increase in staff or an item in the major budget items table to achieve this goal. How's DOT going to go from having 68% of permit applications reviewed in 72 hours in FY16 to 100% this year?
Well, our goal is always 100% for anything that we're doing, ideally, when it comes to this. As I'm sure you're aware, over the past 2 years, we increased our rate. We did come to a settlement. We will be increasing our staff. We're currently working with the Department of Human Resources to create those new positions. So we will have additional staff that will allow us to review more permits in a timely fashion to help us achieve that goal.
I understand that. You said HR. Everyone that's been here so far has said that HR is the impediment of them getting what they need. This is something that has to be corrected. If HR is giving y'all problems, y'all need to reach out and let this council know, because HR is coming in here for a budget hearing, and they have to do something about their processes and how they get people hired and in these positions. They don't have no problem getting our staff in. So why is it so easy for elected officials to get their staff in and for the mayor's office to get their staff in, but you can't get your staff in a reasonable amount of time with the turnover? It doesn't make sense to me. So if HR is your problem, please don't be afraid to let us know, because we will get on HR when they come in here. Mr. Chair, have you heard HR? This is the second time that we heard HR as being a problem for us to get our staff in place. Totally ridiculous.
Sir.
That's one of my favorite departments. Service 681 on page 523. The major budget item lists the position to be transferred from the Office of Neighborhoods as being made into an Operation Manager 1 position, and the change table lists this personnel change as creating the Operation Manager 1 position. Is this position being transferred already in Operation Manager 1 position? If not, what is the current classification and salary for this position? Also, the position cost on page 523 is listed at $132,605. But on page 525, salary is listed at $112,545. What is the salary for this position?
It already was an operations manager, one position when it was transferred to DOT. I believe the salary is $105,000 for that position. I think the 132 might have been what it was budgeted, but the individual in that is at 105. Oh, you're right. I'm sorry, Andrew. As Andrew pointed out, the 132,000 listed on page 523 includes other personnel costs, benefits, health care.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. In the major budget item table on page 523 lists the creation of an HR generalist 2 position. The position is listed at a cost of $70,000, so I guess it's the same thing. Because the salary listed at 61,553. So is that the same thing?
Same thing.
With the benefits and all that included?
Yes, sir.
Okay. They should just list that so that it's already included. Because when you're doing these kind of things, it leads me to believe, I don't know about any other council person, that the salary is one thing and then it's listed as something else. It should be included already so that we'll know that it includes the benefits and everything else with that salary.
Councilman Bullock?
I have one final one.
Mr. President?
I have one final one, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your indulgence. You know, this contract with the grass cutting, I don't know who's responsible for monitoring it, but anybody can see that this company is not performing the best job for the city of Baltimore. And whoever on your staff is responsible for monitoring that, you need to light a fire under their butt. Because it's ridiculous how it looks. I ride and look at it. I have the schedule too. And when I ride, there's no edging. There's debris on the side of the sidewalk, and it looks bad. So, and I'm quite sure other council people have seen this. We're spending too much money on this contract for us not to be getting a better job than we're getting. So I don't know who you have on your staff that's supposed to be monitoring it, but you better do something about them quick, because the new director is coming, and that's one of my problems that I'm going to address with the new director.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, we had a conversation in-house about that and decided we're going to send inspectors out and actually take pictures of the median, so if it looks good, we can document it. If it doesn't look good, we can document it. So we're moving ahead on that.
Okay, I'm going to take my own pictures too.
Thank you. That would help, because if my people miss any, I'd like to know that.
Councilman, Mr. President, what was your request? What were we on, 16?
It was on, well, they answered the ones for those two. The one that I'm interested in now is the grass cutting, that's it.
Okay,
Because they with the salaries, they're listed as one thing without the health benefits and stuff that's included.
what was that, Kron? I thought,
I believe the request was about Be More Bright, the cost of the poles.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I thought they already had that.
okay, so that's 16.
16.
She already said she wants something.
Okay. Councilman Bullock?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate DOT's commitment to sustainable transportation, particularly as it relates around bicycle facilities. One of the things we're trying to get a little bit of clarity on, because we know there are areas in the city that have not really been touched by some of these improvements. One project, the West Baltimore Bike Boulevard, I believe that there was some funding that would be dedicated toward this, about $150,000, but it may be expiring. Could you provide some clarity on that?
Councilman, it's my understanding that we received a $105,000 grant for that. The estimates that we've received are about double of that right now. So we're actually working in-house to determine what we can do with our staff to kind of do the full scope of the project. And then we're also working with the consultant to see if there's any scope that we can adjust in order to maximize the grant. But we are working forward to putting that project in
Okay.
place.
And so you say it's about 210,000 is what the scope looks like now, and you're trying to reduce it?
It's a little higher than that, but we're working to get it down as best we can. And I was actually working on that before I came over here to see what products we may be able to purchase on our end and not through the contractor, to be able to do it in a more cost-effective manner.
And to clarify, so what we're looking at is some things like signs and markings that we can do with in-house forces, and to keep the things that would be better done by a contractor as within the scope of the grant.
Okay, and then what kind of time frame are you looking at for all this?
Ideally, we're in the situation where if we can kind of give a go order, we can get going within 45 days. So we're just trying to get all those kind of final items ironed out internally.
Okay. Thank you.
One second. Can you provide a list of the positions that you've been trying to get filled and how long that's been going on, and if there's been any issues with HR with that? And that's Quran number 17. Councilman Dorsey, you're asking a quick follow-up to Bullocks?
Yeah, my understanding was that the grant funding for that project expires on June 1st. Is that incorrect?
I believe it expires at the end of June.
End of June.
End of June.
Thank you.
A lot of times what they do is have grants expire at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. Councilman Dorsey?
Thank you. I love DOT. It's my favorite. So I have lots of questions. I'll ask a few now and hopefully a few later. I'm actually concerned with oversight of outside contract work. I know that recently I saw a whole bunch of conduit cuts made. DOT supervises conduit cut repair, I guess, and the work is substandard, and I want to know who's holding the contractors that do this kind of stuff, these repairs accountable. You can drive over the brand new pavement and feel exactly where every one of the cuts was made, even though it's a new permanent road resurfacing, as far as I can tell.
I guess the answer to that, are you specifically talking about conduit work, or might it have been water, wastewater, BGE, Verizon? Because the answers are different depending on which of those they were.
All of the above.
Okay. We have conduit, of course, is under DOT, and we have our own inspectors for that, and that's under our tech division. The other utilities are monitored by our street cut folks. They work out of the maintenance division.
So when
Councilman, I can provide some clarity. So we have the street cuts division that's responsible for ensuring that any restoration to street done from utility work is up to city standards. I guess what you're referencing is that it seems like there's a lot that's not up to the standards that we would want them to be. And that's the case. We have 6 inspectors whose job it is to ensure compliance across the city. So there's really no way for them to look at every cut that happens in the city. So one thing that we're hoping to do as part of a big revamp of our street cut policy is to add more people to that staff. So we'll be coming to you soon for help on that. But it's something that we realize is an issue. Our inspectors are actually pretty good, and we are able to fine contractors who don't perform work up to our standard. But the problem, again, is being able to lay eyes on every cut. So that's why it's important that citizens send those complaints to us, you send those complaints to us, so we can go out and make sure that these are done to our standard and fine contractors if they're not.
So I don't get it. There aren't like hundreds of cuts being repaired every single day. Like, you've got to be able to lay eyes on all of these in a reasonable short period of time immediately after the work is done. Is there just not a system of accountability in place? Like that somebody says, we just did this work, and the department says, we're going to go check the work before we pay you the retainage that you haven't been paid to complete the job, because the city does withhold retainage from its contractors. Am I not correct about that?
Remember, most of these aren't our contractors. This is independent utility agencies or, DPW water and wastewater. So they do, BGE and DPW do most of the cuts. So they aren't usually our contractors.
But but then they have so BGE has a contractor come behind and do the permanent repair to the road where they've done a bunch of cuts. Is there not a system of reporting back to DOT when our roads are being affected like this?
So, Councilman, that's when our staff, our internal 6 inspectors, will go out and look at BG&E to see what they have done, and if it hasn't been done properly, they'll issue them a fine, and then we'll continue to follow up with them with that. One of the other problem areas, I don't know if you saw that on page 569, we actually had over 24,000 street cuts last year. There's no way 6 staff can get to that. So we try our best to kind of triage these. And DPW, I believe they are now withholding retainage from their contracts that are not doing their street cut restorations properly. The other issue that we have to deal with is illegal street cuts. If there are those small utility companies that go out there and make cuts that we don't know about. So our guys, when they're out in the field, they're trying to identify those as well. But we do have a system in place where when BG&E is finishing up something, our guys go out to make sure that they're doing it right, and if they don't, we find them and make them do it again.
And one addition to that is the utility agencies are required to mark their cuts so we know who they are, but of course there are some that go out there and are renegades and don't mark them. We have to do a little investigation to find out who it is. But the big players are getting pretty good about following those rules, like BGE, for example.
And so what is the period that they have to?
Well, it varies. Sometimes they'll do a cut and they'll finish the project a block or two away and they do a temporary repair, and then when they finish the rest of the project and have to come back and dig it back up, then they do a permanent
when's
repair.
it too late for us to tell them that it's not okay?
Well, it's never too late.
It's never
Well,
too
I wouldn't
late.
say never, but we've dealt with some that have been out there for years, and we fine them for not closing them up within a reasonable amount of time, because I've been in some of the hearings of that.
So I have a question that I've been asking about the cost between doing things in-house versus contracting out, particularly for design and studies. I'd like to get a number. God, I'm still have a hard time trying to ask this question in a concise way. What are we spending to do road design for projects by outside contractors or firms rather than doing it in-house? And I understand there's perhaps some barrier to getting the right staff in-house and being able to retain quality talent at what we're presently able to pay. But I want to know what we're spending because we don't have those people.
We can put that together for you as part of the follow-up.
Okay.
Thank you. That's number 18.
And the last thing I'll ask right now.
Councilman, I'm going to come back to you,
Okay.
unless it's directly related to what you just
It
said.
is related to that because
Okay.
it's about
Go ahead.
the cost to maintain our street lights in-house for the 20-some% of the city that we do in-house versus the 70-some% that BGE does.
I had a follow-up. Of the 24,000 legal cuts, of the 24,000.
Councilman, hang on one second. Councilman Dorsey, your request was the second one, the cost for something to do with BG.
A comparative analysis of the cost for streetlight maintenance in-house versus BGE, especially considering we have a higher performance report than BGE does.
That's true.
So Karan, that was number 19. Number 18 was what are we paying for road design in-house versus externally contracted. Okay, Councilman Henry.
Of the 24,000 cuts that are the legal ones that are made, how many of those are by non-city or city-paid entities? Like how many of those are BGE or some other or some smaller utility company? I mean, just roughly. I mean, are we talking 50%? Are we talking 25%? What?
Just to ballpark it, I would say about 10%
Okay.
are entities other than BGE and DPW.
No. But how many are BG&E? Like what percentage?
40%?
40% are BG&E. Okay, so is there some law preventing us from charging them more so that we can afford to inspect their work more closely?
We're actually working on that with the revised street cut policy. What that would do is increase the cost of the utility agencies, which would include BGE. Sorry, I'm not going to, there we go. The revised street cut policy that we're working on would do just that. It would raise the costs to the utility entities, which would give us more, for two reasons. One, it would give us more to do inspections, but the other is it would help place the cost of cutting up a road, which, cause it to demise more quickly, puts more of that on utility agencies and less on the city.
I mean, it sounds like a legitimate impact fee, and if right now we're only collecting enough to pay for 6 inspectors citywide of 24,000 cuts,
Right.
clearly we should be charging more.
Right, we agree. That's
and-
why we're working on the revised policy.
I'll just note as an aside that if you would like help identifying the illegal cuts, you could tell us about the legal ones in advance so that when,
I know with 24,000 of them, that would be a lot of notification.
pardon, that 24,000 cuts, legal cuts, breaks down into, not 2,000 per district, unless,
Right.
I mean, admittedly, they may be more concentrated in some districts, but you're probably talking about a couple hundred a month.
Couple hundred, well, 100, I guess if
per
it's,
district.
yeah, that's,
Per district. And if we knew where they were supposed to be, then we might be able to tell you when there's one that isn't on our list. Because people complain to us about the traffic and parking restrictions that these cuts, this work causes. And we spend time trying to track down where this came from, who's doing it, what this work is for. We spend time doing that.
We do
if
a
you
lot of
just
that,
sent
too.
us a list every week or every month or whatever of what you know is going to happen, then we would have a list that we can just look on when somebody complains. And if they complain about one that's not on our list, bingo, we can tell you you've got an illegal cut.
Why don't, how about we send you the list and you see if it would be helpful to you? We can see
yeah,
what we
let's,
have now.
yeah.
Can
can take a look at that.
can you send us the list by district?
We'll find a way to do that.
Okay.
Number 20, a list of all the street cuts by district. Of all legal street cuts. Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep mine quick. I just had a question about the circulator, service number 690. So it says, and maybe I'm sure we've talked about this at length prior to my time, but I was just curious as to how you go about counting riders on the circulator. It says last fiscal year there were 3.4 million riders. I'm just trying to figure out how that's possible in a city of 600,000, and how we can hit that number.
So there's actually on each of the buses, there's a passenger counter, so it's not unique riders.
Oh, they're not unique.
Yeah, I when I ride it every day, I count as 5 in that total, one for each
And
day.
if you do both ways.
So there's really no,
That's right, 10 if I go both ways, that's right.
okay. So there's no way to really know how many people use it and where they come from? And that
Not in terms of a unique ridership. We have done some surveys in the past, and I'm sure we can forward it to you, about kind of the demographics of the riders and where they're coming from and where they're going to. We've done that in the past.
Yeah, that would be helpful if you could send it over. That was my only question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, that had to be done by surveys.
Councilman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go to service. Hold on, I gotta find out which one it is. It's the yard. Impound 689. Mr. Murphy, we spend a good bit of money storing vehicles out at Pulaski. Do you roughly how much of the budget for for impounding in disposal of vehicles is spent specifically at the Pulaski yard? Do you know?
I don't. Chief, do you know? Charlie's not here. We'll have to get that to you.
And while we're on that topic specifically, because my worry is that I have seen cars out at Pulaski for like 6, 7, 8 years just sitting there, and with the amount of space that is there, it's my personal belief that the city could actually give away some of that space, if not all of it, and have the impounding done in a more efficient way, in which that piece of property, which is in prime industrial land, could be used to generate tax dollars for the city of Baltimore, because it was a time where we used all of the land all of the time, and the cars did not stay out there. So In particular, I'm thinking about this boat that I see on my way to work every day that has been there for like 4 or 5 years that clearly no one's coming to get and no one wants. But I think that have we ever looked at the amount of money we spend to store vehicles there along over a period of time? Ma'am?
Councilman, I don't know that we've per se looked at storing an individual vehicle over the course of time, but with those that have been there for multiple years, they're police holds. So odds are they're still part of an investigation, and we can't release them from the yard until we're actually given the all clear from the police department to do so. So that's probably that boat that you're seeing every day.
Well, we know we can say many things about our police department, but efficient is not one of the words that comes to mind when we talk about them. I don't know what they expect you guys to do with a bombed out car or a boat or something that has been damaged. Any evidence is going to be washed away by rain if it's inside the car and the car doesn't have any windows on it or the trunk is open. So I think that we need to have a deeper conversation with them about being more realistic with that. My next question, Mr. Murphy, is 683, street management. Where in the budget now is the money for alleys and footways? There used to be a time when it was specific in the budget where we would see how much was allocated for alleys and footways, but this year it is not. My guess is that it is included in rehab and maintenance and repairs. Am I right by that?
There's actually, if you look at page 531, we have 2 lines for alleys and footways. We have one on compliance inspection and one for construction supervision. These are the staff in our tech division that work on this, but the majority of our alleys and footways budget is actually in the capital budget,
the capital.
Not in the operating
Thank
budget.
you. And how much is that this year? Is it still $1 million?
$3 million.
$3 million citywide. Thank you. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Clark. Bless you.
God bless you. I'm not trying to be, there weren't any seats. I want to ask about streetlights. I just want to ask a question about streetlights. I want to know the categories of streetlights. I mean, and I want to ask which of them it is that is so difficult to shade. All right, so let me put it this way. There's X thousand streetlights that is in the mayor's office to give to high crime area neighborhoods to make sure they get well lit, correct? It's 60,000?
6,000.
6,000. So that's been designated, so they're designated to go to certain neighborhoods.
Well, not entirely. There's a lot more decisions.
Okay,
to be
well,
made
I
and
have
some opportunities.
I ask only because I have a Darley Park neighborhood that should qualify. I mean, it's not really not high crime, but it needs lights very badly, and all right. So there's that's 60,000, and you go to the mayor's office to try to get that for a whole neighborhood, right?
I guess I'm hedging a little bit because there is still discussions about how to best do that. I think what we would recommend, well, we're aware of Darley Park. We did a walk with.
I'm sorry, what?
We are aware of the interest in Darley Park, and that
You're interested in Darley Park? What?
I mean, we're aware of the
Oh,
interest
you are.
by
Yeah.
Darley
Well,
Park.
I sent all the street light things into DOT and to you, so that you, because all my different neighborhoods that have different requests. But okay, so
Now,
if
what's happening is
if you're a certain neighborhood that has certain characteristics, which I don't know what they are, the mayor's office is going to decide about what to do with the 6,000 lights, and maybe, for example, a Darley Park might be one of them and get a whole bunch of lights.
might indeed.
Right.
Just to clarify, where we are right now is as you might know, the mayor started with the Penn North area. We have then taken the 4 transformation zones, which were areas designated by the police that are high crime, and we've made those a priority. But there's lots more to do in other parts of the city, and Darley Park may very well be in that list of places to go to after the transformation zones.
But that's a long time, and it's Okay,
Maybe.
but maybe there'll be one of those, and maybe they won't. So then getting back to what I'm more used to, before there were 6,000 somehow going somewhere, which we haven't done any yet, right?
Well, and there's two pieces to this. One is the 6,000 new lights, and the other is the conversion of 30-some thousand existing lights into high-intensity LEDs.
Okay,
So
so
that could be the Darley Park answer, too. I don't know enough about the
Well, I mean,
specifics.
I'm
but-
thinking more of Darley Park. What I'm thinking of, I'm a constituent worker. I want to ask the right questions to the right people. So, one, I don't know how to ask for being one of the 6,000. I mean, I'm saying
I
it
wouldn't
now.
worry about that. I would just let us know where there are spots that are inadequately lit, because what'll happen is there may be a solution with just saying, hey, we're going to upgrade all these to high-intensity LEDs. That might fix it. Or if the gap is between lights and needs to be addressed by a new light, then we can look for opportunities to put in new lights.
And I appreciate that. So I understand what you're saying. I don't mean to drag this out, but let me step back for a minute. There's 6,000 lights. There's another, how many thousand that
30,
are
what's it,
going to be
35,000 or
upgraded
so?
separate from that?
Yes.
All right, so, yeah, and like a Darley Park, they want LEDs, bright LEDs where it's dark, basically. But here's my problem. I'm used to, your department to me responds, like, hey, we can do that, it's gonna take, or like a sidewalk response was the other day, very honestly, it'll be about 7 years before we can get that one fixed. But it's a response and it's honest, okay? Now I'm gonna go fight that, but, so basically, a Darley Park, for example, in the last administration had done the tour and written what it needed with the tour. Then somehow that all got lost in the shuffle of transition. We did it all over again and submitted. And I hear what you're saying, but my Darley Park people say, it's dark and we have crime. What are you doing? And my answer is, of course, my colleague got the part of Darley Park lit that we share, that is just south of my part of it. So, of course, I always look to him for advice because he got it done right away. But the whole northern part, nothing has been done.
We'll get you a plan.
Right.
Of what we
So
recommend.
it's really not, I'm really not being critical and I'll stop. I'm not being critical of your agency whatsoever. Responsiveness is good. But this light thing has me crazy, and the last part of it is, what is it about shades that you can't put shades on some of these LEDs that are shining into people's windows? That someone told me from DOT, a guy on the street working with an inspector guy, that if you put a shade on these new LEDs, then the 15-year guarantee we have on these lamps disappears and there is no guarantee, and so we're not insured anymore against failure of a light. So is that correct?
Kenny, anything you can add?
Kenny, oh. Are you got this too?
Sir, can you please use a microphone?
Remembering Kenny Ching,
So
maintenance chief, coming up.
what he's saying is that that's not the case. It doesn't void the warranty. There are some types of fixtures that we are unable to put shades on. But of course, as you know, there are lots that we have been able to put shades on.
Yes, I do, and that's what I don't know how to talk to my constituent. I'm getting good responses. That's not it. I don't understand what's the difference between this bunch can and this bunch can't. So I've taken enough time.
We can do that for you, provide what the difference is,
We'll get
or
back to
if
you on
you'd
that.
rather just give us the lights that you want
No,
shades
no,
on.
I'd rather know what's going on, and then I can pick and choose how I ask for something instead of just shooting in the dark.
It also may be different
Yeah.
between BGE and us, because if the light's on a wood pole, for example, that means it was installed by and owned by BGE. If it's on a metal pole, it's ours. We'll have to check and see whether they have different rules than we do.
But no, I don't have to do that as much anymore as I used to, because your maintenance division makes that, they know what they're doing and they know who to go to.
Yes, they do.
So it's easier. I need to know the product. I don't know what I'm asking for anymore.
Okay, can we,
No.
okay. Kenny, I apologize for interrupting you. If anyone else is testifying that's not at a microphone, if you could please come up and speak at the microphone, because this is being televised. Councilman Scott, again? Did I misplace your card in here?
Yeah, it was somebody else before me.
Yep. Councilwoman Middleton.
I mean, I have more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Murphy, and your team. Thank you also for your service. I guess my first question, does transportation have an apprenticeship program operating at this time? A city apprenticeship program in any of your programs?
The short answer is yes, but the details are what I won't be able to provide, but we can certainly get that to you. Unless, Lindsay, is that something you can?
Do you know what, where it's operating?
We have a few different things. We have, internship. We have training, I know, in our Tisha's group.
Internships are not apprenticeship.
We have different kinds of programs. Yeah, I guess.
Is your program affiliated with the state system, like the one program I know of in DPW?
I don't know. I'll have to
Okay.
find out.
So I'm going to assume that the answer is no, but until you give me information. And, I'm stressing that again, basically for all of us on the council. Years ago, again, the city apprenticeship system was a strong surviving system in just about every single major agency. And in light of the problems that we continue to have in this city and the failing school system and not really helping graduates that do not go on to college, and of course, some of their parents started out in government and, good paying jobs. And, then I hear we have contracting out of things simple, as our president said, the completion of grass cutting, of medium strips and so on. I can give an example of, we have, as council members, really try to push community involvement and engagement, and I can give you an example of the medium strip on Callaway Avenue, where it's the only medium strip that have wonderful apple trees, and the community, two associations came together to put that medium strip together, and it's a clear example of a partner working with outside nonprofit, and they have apple festivals together every year and bring people out and make apple cider from the apple trees that
On the
grow in that
medium?
medium strip.
Wow.
But then we have the city, transportation that cuts the medium strip, and then I get the feedback that it's done, it was terribly done, the clippings everywhere, we're supposed to be setting the example to help and supply resources, and the city is the one that needs the resources to learn how to do things. So all that to say, I think it's important, and we could save money by reincorporating strong apprenticeship. We need to go back to that. The state, it gives money to organizations and places that have apprenticeships now. It's just the best idea to do, and I don't know what the problem seems to be. Do you want to
Well,
respond to that?
Couple things. When it comes to landscape maintenance, a couple of years ago, the city made the decision to rely more on contracted services than in-house, because we used to have a large landscaping staff, and we no longer have that as a result of that decision. We do have a number of different kinds of programs to try to help people to better themselves. We hire people as seasonal maintenance aides, and when full-time positions become available in that, doing the similar kinds of work, we bring them on board to make them permanent. So that's a form of an apprenticeship program. We have this program in the workforce development, which is more geared toward getting people to get GEDs and things like that. Well, technically, it's not an apprenticeship program, but it certainly helps you make yourself more marketable in the job market. So there's a couple of different things that we do. We don't have as formalized a apprenticeship program as there was in the past.
I think you need to consider that
Mhm.
because apprenticeship programs, it's true certification, and this person can use this around the world.
Right.
It's a career-focused thing.
No, we
So-
agree, and that's why I think I do hold our maintenance division up as an example of how we bring folks in on a temporary basis, and as they become good workers, we bring them on board as permanent employees.
We need to go back to that. On page 524, there's a expenditure activity, Urban Youth Corps Program, which in the volume 2, which gives over $500,000 to support this program. What is an Urban Youth Corps Program? That's a lot of money.
It's actually the workforce development program that Frank referenced earlier. I don't know if you were here during our presentation. It's a federal grant that we get, and it's just mislabeled in the budget book.
Okay.
So this is actually a grant. It's a 3-year grant. So when you're looking at that, it's multiple years worth of money. So if you look on page 523, you can see that we actually spend about $200,000 a year. And I can follow up with the actual number of people that we have in the program, but as Frank was just mentioning, it's a program that we established through our contract administration program, where we try and have people go back GEDs and workforce training that we get federal dollars for.
See, and this is an example of how someone could, you can partner, because the federal government also has apprenticeship programs, initiatives. And these are things that you can get information from people there and from the state and partner. Even though this is a 2-year thing, that you need to learn how to keep things going with what's given to you at the beginning.
Yeah, and we've actually been getting this money for a number of years. Every time we've reapplied, we've received it. So this program's been going for a number of years, and we partner with the Baltimore City Community College on this program.
Could you give all of us or the committee more information about this program?
Yep, absolutely. I think we provided it last year, but I'll provide the updated version for this year.
And I'd like to help in any way I can
That would be
to
great.
kind of make that connection with the other entities that I have been speaking of. That's all I have.
So that's number 21. More information about the Urban Youth Program. 2 quick things before we get over to Councilman Pinkett. One, can you provide us with the committee with an updated org chart, please?
Oh, sure.
Yep, number 22. And then, just out of curiosity, I heard you mention that there was an error in the budget book, and we've talked to a couple other agencies already that, or at least conversations I've had in which there are errors. I'm curious, did you review what was in the budget book for your agency prior to this being published?
No.
BBMR did not give you that opportunity?
No. We communicate with BBMR in terms of what's going to go into the major budget items and the change, but we don't actually see what is printed in the line by lines.
Okay, so
we have access to the budget book system, but in terms of the final document, I'm sure Andrew can speak more to this, we don't see the actual final printout until it's published.
So if you had been given an opportunity to review this, there are certain, minor errors that could have been caught theoretically.
Theoretically, yes.
Thank you very much. Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you. Well, this isn't necessarily a question, since you brought up errors. With the street cut management, Service 696, for FY16, the actual for number of street cuts was 24,000 about, and then the target for FY18 is the same number. Is that an error, or is that?
Well, remember, these are utility cuts made by other entities, and all we do is manage them and try to make them do them right. We don't generate more or less. We just
Right,
manage what we get.
It's not an
How
error.
can you have an actual, to have a target that's?
So when we established a target, we weren't quite sure. You're kind of doing this a year and change in advance. And so when we got our actual, we assumed based on what we know of the type of utility work that's going on in the city that we'll probably see a similar level of cuts. So we didn't want to make a prediction that maybe it's 10% more, 20% more. So we took what our actual was in fiscal 2016 and we're using that as our 2018. Honestly, I think we're going to, not that we want to exceed our fiscal 2017 target of 8,000, but I think we're going to see many more cuts than that. So as we move forward and keep seeing year to year, we'll adjust that target accordingly. But you know, if I took the fiscal 2016 actual along with the 2015 and 14 and did an average, I think it would have way underestimated what we expect to see.
Got you. And I mean, maybe you can't answer this, but so is there a metrics that shows that number of street cuts relate to a thriving economy, a thriving city? Because that just, I mean, it just seems like, is there a correlation between development, growth, and street cuts? And
Well,
so
there
are we
is.
saying that we are expecting the city to keep growing, you know, economically?
There is, but certainly there's also a correlation between utility entities deciding to upgrade their infrastructure, and that probably produces more cuts even than development-related ones. So like if BGE goes down to Lindsay's neighborhood in South Baltimore and tears up the streets, you get a lot of street cuts because they're redoing gas lines. So all of these things kind of contribute.
So it could mean something. It could mean that we're in trouble.
Right, it could be we're going through a lot, or it could be good in the, like Southeast, it might be development. In Pimlico, it might be them redoing the gas lines, but probably not as much development.
Yeah, I think, Councilman, for the most part, I think a lot of the cuts that we're seeing are those utility cuts. You know, BG&E and DPW are both doing main replacements, gas and water. So I think we're going to continue to see a lot of that. But in the areas where I think you see a lot of development, we ideally hopefully have conduit there. So when things like fiber are coming in, they can go straight into the conduit and don't have to cut up the streets. But I know we, as an agency that is responsible for the conduit, we're working very diligently with Baltimore Gas and Electric to upgrade the conduit because like the water mains are also extremely old. Its system's over 100 years old. So I think it's a combination of both. Yeah.
Got you.
Exactly.
And my next question, does the city presently have a one-cut policy? And if so, how effective is it?
What do you mean by one cut?
One cut meaning, you know, once we cut the street open, let's do everything that we need to do. Because, you know, it hasn't been said today, but another issue in many communities is, you know, we see a street cut and then, you know, it gets repaved and then, you know, a few months later, somebody comes and cuts in the street again. And so
what I can tell you we have is something where we work with the utility entities through the Invista with tracks projects. There have been a number of times when we have deferred resurfacing projects because we found out that there was going to be a major utility project coming along. We wanted to make sure they were done out of the way. So, you know, it's not exactly one cut because I don't know how you know that. Part of our problem is through the best intentions of working with BGE and DPW on planned projects, of course, that doesn't identify things like you redo a new street and it breaks a water service and they have to dig down to fix that up. So we do work with them. Ideally, we would have everybody replace all their services when we redo streets, but we also know that's not in their budget anymore. It's in ours. So the coordination, we believe, has made a big difference. Places like in South Baltimore where there's BGEs tearing things up, I know to some degree, much to Councilman Costello's chagrin, we haven't been able to move forward with this traffic calming project, which we have had planned for a year and a half. But the good news is when we do it, BGE will be out of the way. They have less reason to have to cut the street, and it should stay longer. So I think the result is going to be good. Sometimes it defers projects, but for good reasons. Even in the East North Avenue project that we have underway right now, part of the reason that got deferred so long was to allow water to get in and redo the water lines that they decided to do somewhat at a late juncture in the project design. But the good news is, with that done, that's one less thing that can break with our brand new road in place.
So the program you mentioned in Vista?
Vista is the software that helps track.
So does BGE use that?
Yes.
Okay. So with all of the projects that BG&E does, I guess because they're using the same software, you all are familiar with.
I can't 100% guarantee that they're all in there, but we continuously ask that they put them in, and we do know that they use it and put things in there, and that has helped us schedule projects. It usually results in us deferring ours to let them get in and out. So it takes longer for us to get to ours and get it finished, but the good news is you have less reason to have it torn up when you're done.
So is it, what can we do to make that system work better?
I don't know, anybody donned in it so far?
Well, so part of the new policy that we're proposing for street cuts, which we're ready to present to the mayor's office, so we hope that it's going to be moved forward soon, is putting a moratorium on streets that we've done work on, so that once we've done work on the street and we've paved it, you can't do any work on it unless it's an emergency, or if it's something incredibly urgent, then the fines, of course, are going to be more expensive, and you're going to be asked to repave the whole street. So that's something that we're looking to do. I mean, again, the challenge is that, you know, and Director Murphy referenced the East North Avenue job. We DOT were rebuilding the entire street. DPW decided it was a good time to redo their water lines there. BG&E decided we're not ready to redo the gas lines there. So because there's so many different competing priorities, that street's going to be completely rebuilt, but the BGE infrastructure isn't going to be replaced. And while it's not going to break today, it will break sooner than the water infrastructure and the new street infrastructure that we put in. So a lot of what we try to do through Invista and the programs we manage is to get everyone on the same page, but with so much city to cover and so much infrastructure and competing needs in terms of infrastructure expiring, it's difficult to do, but we certainly are trying to move towards that one-cut policy to make sure that we don't end up redigging up the street over and over again.
Okay.
Now, just to let you know, when we do roll out the new policy, assuming that's where we go, there will be pushback from the development community because it will mean there'd be more cost to them to make utility connections to new buildings, for example. So that's the downside. The good news is it'll get us more of the money we need to maintain the streets, and it will provide a disincentive for chopping up the street any more than you have to. The downside is developers are going to say, you've added to my project costs.
Okay. I had another question related to conduits. When we do, as it relates to conduits, is there a strategy or where DOT works with MOIT as it relates to broadband infrastructure? So when I guess other entities are using the conduit, or do we use that as an opportunity to take broadband?
DOT is just responsible for the maintenance of the conduit. We are not in the fiber business. That's MOIT's choice if they want to kind of go into the conduit. So we're more than willing to let them know where we are restoring conduit, but our primary, the largest occupant of the conduit system is Baltimore Gas and Electric. And so we partner very closely with them in terms of laying out where we're going to be doing our replacements or restoration type of work. But we're always willing to work with MOIT, but we can't be in the fiber business, and we can't use any conduit funds for implementation of fiber or anything related to that.
Okay. Now, I guess it was more so when maintenance of the conduit, or the conduit is being improved or expanded, is there a communication that then goes to MOIT that says this might be an opportunity to expand?
We haven't done that now. We're just gearing up in terms of a proactive plan with our conduit system. Prior to the rate increase, we were really just reactive. We would get a call that a duct collapsed, and we went out to repair it. But we're just now shifting into that, so that is something we can talk about.
Okay. My last question was related to bike lanes. Service 690. When it talks about number of miles of new bike infrastructure constructed for FY16, the target was 16 number of miles, and then the actual was 2.6, and so the target for FY17 is 8, and then 8 is 8.3. So, what happened where our target was 16, but we only did 2.6?
Our bike coordinator actually has just left us, and she's the one who established those targets, so I can't speak fully on what the 16 was, but I believe it was because we were just establishing the target. I think she was kind of taking 2 years worth and kind of rolling it into one, since we had never had that target before. So it was like 8, which became the 16, and then each year 8 and 8.
So we're confident that we'll hit the target of 8 and then 8.3?
I certainly hope so, but I'm not sure exactly where we are. But we can follow up with how many miles we've constructed to date.
And so when we either repave roads or do anything in the road, is there a portion of that that is committed to bike lanes?
There's
example,
a review.
Do we go into a road thinking, you know, we're not just repaving this road, we're looking at it to see if there's some bike infrastructure.
We do that. We don't guarantee that one is always put in, but a lot of roads that get resurfaced, we look for opportunities. Is there enough width here? We can take a few, you know, the 4 or 5 feet to put a bike lane in and still make everything work. Done that on things like St. Paul Street. We've got more major projects going on Madison, Biddle, and Preston. But a lot of resurfacings that we've done over the years because once you resurface it, you've got a clean slate and you have the opportunity to reallocate the lane widths.
So, and I don't know whether this is federal money or state or local, but I know like on some road contracts, there's like a 1% or some percentage for art. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So is there,
Local law.
this local, okay. So
And it applies
is
to
there-
local
is there-
funding only.
Is there the ability to do something similar for bike infrastructure?
Well,
Where
well, I mean,
a certain percentage of the money for that particular improvement?
we don't do it specific to percentages. We look for opportunities. And so some projects like the Maryland Cathedral Cycle Track were a couple million by themselves, but then there's a lot of other less expensive things that we can do by restriping a road. And when we restripe the road, we don't allocate that to a bike budget. That comes out of the resurfacing budget, just like the rest of the roadway work. So we don't need funding for that. I mean, we always need funding, and we get grants to do a lot of the things that we've done. The West Baltimore Bike Boulevard project is going to be partly grant funded. Some of the downtown network work was grant funded. So we go after a lot of grants for bike infrastructure because there are opportunities.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Councilman Henry. Ellen, we've been joined by Councilman Z. Cohen from the 1st District.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Frank, I just wanted to follow up to begin with on a conversation we were having about administrative orders, and whenever any changes are made to parking restrictions or traffic restrictions on city streets, those changes have to either be an ordinance of the mayor and city council, or they have to be journalized through the administrative order process. And there's been some confusion over who actually does the administrative orders, because we don't seem to get as many as we used to, but we still are seeing changes being made.
And you're seeing some, but maybe not all. That's right.
So who actually, is there one person who does administrative orders and everybody who needs one funnels through them, or
Well,
how does that work?
It depends on what it's for. For the parking changes, which is a fairly consistent demand, and that comes out of the traffic division, that's a little different from some other ones that have come through actually probably through our legislative liaison now, but for the parking changes, they'll be generated by the traffic division. That'll be under Graham Young's.
Okay,
area.
but changes in traffic restrictions, like making a street one way, would that
Well,
also come through traffic?
That would be, yes, that would be traffic too.
Okay, so who is that? Who would?
Graham Young.
Okay, all right, good. We should chat later. Okay, then the second question is, are the street cut, going back to a previous question about street cut inspectors, are they inspecting anything else other than the 24,000 legal street cuts?
They're just doing street cuts.
Okay, because now, like, if you play with a calculator, that if there's 6 of them, and we can talk also about the fact that it looks like there's 7 in the budget book, but if there's 6 of them.
One is the chief of that group.
Okay, so the chief doesn't go out and inspect?
He will.
Pardon?
He will, but there's 6 designated inspectors.
Okay, so
Don't the 6 include non-street cut inspectors? I think that's more than.
That's a separate
Okay,
budget.
I thought that included, it used to be
so
John's
even if
group.
there's just 6, if there's 24,000 cuts, that breaks down to each inspector having
4,000.
to expect
4,000.
16 a day. 4,000 a year,
Divided by 250.
80 a week, 16 a day.
So you're going to hate my response. But of those 6, only typically 4 are out in the field because the other 2 are in doing all of the paperwork that is associated with the issuance of fines.
The issuance of fines.
So this group does the fine. They go out, they do the inspections, they document, and then they come back and they have to put together all of the paperwork for the fines to be issued. So it's them and the administrative person in that office.
So there's an administrative person in the office who's there all the time, and the paperwork needed to generate the fines takes up an entire administrative person and, on average, half of the inspectors?
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, we'd be happy to meet with you, kind of walk you through the process from start to finish.
Well, what we were curious about was, are the inspectors assigned geographically?
I believe they're by sector.
By sector?
Which means yes.
Yep, so, yeah, we have the city broken into 4 quadrants.
Four quadrants. Okay, so it's not like somebody's problem would be they're trying to run from something up in northeast down to something in southwest and then back up to something in northwest.
Right, so they try to be pretty strategic in where they're looking at
okay.
cuts, but then again, remember, they're also responding to 311 complaints and complaints from other places, so, maybe I'm going to start at, north and Charles and work my way east, but I also have a 311 request that's way out by Pimlico that I need to check on.
What kind of 311 request are they responding to?
Issues with street quality.
Okay, so that goes back to the first question of, is all they're inspecting is street cuts? And your answer then is really no. They're also responding to general concerns about quality of existing streets.
Right, they're responsible for street cuts, but oftentimes a citizen will put something in as a pothole, but it's actually a street cut, or they put it in as a street cut and it's something else altogether. So typically, they're responding to what we in DOT would consider street cuts, but it may be something else.
Okay, so but that does the 311 calls / complaints, that is not counted into your 24,000 number.
Correct. So, because think about it, most citizens do not know what a street cut is. They're going to see a hole or something, they're going to go, that's a pothole. And they're going to put it in as a pothole, 311.
So how many of those 311 requests are you also responding to?
I have no idea. We'll have to follow up on that one.
Yeah, could we get that as a...
What was the number of?
Basically, we're trying to get a sense of what's the total number of responses that each of these inspectors are being expected to do. So I guess I'm trying to back out.
What's the specific documentation request?
The specific documentation is the total number of 311 requests that inspectors, that the same group of street cut inspectors would be expected to respond to, on top of the 24,000 legal street cut permits that they're required to inspect.
Okay.
Okay.
When was that? 23. Thank you. All right.
In fact, if I could just anecdote, about 2 weeks ago, I got a call from the council president about a pothole on, I think is it Eager or Biddle, I forget, here in East Baltimore. And I decided to look at it myself because I was out and about that day, and it turned out to be a failed utility cut. A BGE cut, and it clearly did need attention, but it's just an example of how different things come in different ways.
Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much of the cost, I asked you about this the other day, Frank, and I want to kind of try to get a little bit more information on this. How much of the damage to city property that is done by vehicles that are crashing into bollards or walls or curbs or whatever else, how much of that damage are we recouping? And how does that kind of track? And how much are you seeing come back in so that you can fund the repairs to these damages?
So actually, I believe that is tracked by the law department. They're the ones that handle those claims, so we'll have to follow up with them on those numbers. But in terms of money coming back, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe all of the claims money goes into the general fund. So it's not like set up so that we get that allocation back to us to go fix the curb or the pole or whatever was damaged.
But you have to do the repair anyway.
Uh-huh.
Right.
I'll follow up. I was going to ask a little bit more about these inspectors. I'm sorry to belabor the point. But you've got, under conduits, these 7 that we were talking about.
No, the ones that we were talking about are in street cuts. They're in service 696. Conduit's separate.
Okay. Street cuts. Okay.
That's,
And then there are, I'm sorry, I lost my place in here. There are a whole lot of other inspectors under, on page
Street management.
532. Yes, sir. Public Works Inspector, 1, 2, 3.
so these are our inspectors that work in our tech division.
Well, our capital projects.
On our capital projects. So they're separate. Anytime we have, Flanagan or somebody out there doing a road reconstruction, this is what those guys do. So they're separate from the street cuts inspectors.
So if you have a resurfacing project going on, these are the guys that make sure they do all the things that the contract requires, and also they certify for payment each month how much quantity they did, how many square feet of pavement, how many square yards of concrete, so that they get the proper payment. That's what those inspectors do. Just like DPW has them for all their projects.
Okay, and I was going to ask also about the bike stuff. We have the 16 miles is in the bike master plan annually, but we have we're only funding bike planning through grants. Am I correct in that? I mean,
Well,
is there any money in the
No, and also when we redo resurfacings and other projects, we look at incorporating bike facilities into that. That doesn't get charged to the bike program, if you will. Like if we resurface, when we resurfaced St. Paul Street through Charles Village and we striped in a bike lane, that was covered under the resurfacing project's cost.
So we're building out some cycling infrastructure that's not part of a master plan, but
No, it is. Well, it is. Part of what they look at when they look at a resurfacing is this street part of the bike master plan, and should we be incorporating something into it?
Okay. That's all right now. Mr. Chair.
Councilman Stokes.
Mr. Murphy, this is particularly about the bike lanes. I know you're adding bike lanes, I'm sure, but in my district, you have communities that were able to give input on how they want their lanes designed. And then the African-American community woke up and they hit a bike lane. So I get the calls, will there be a better way of communicating with other community leaders about adding a bike lane? And the bike share, I get a lot of calls from businesses that the bike share were installed. They knew absolutely nothing about it. That interferes with the delivery of their food to their restaurant. So would there be a better way of communicating with the business and the community in reference to the bike share and the bike lanes?
Well, I guess there must be. We certainly have outreach that we conduct. I know we're working now in Fells Point to find a good spot for a bike share. And we've been, doing outreach to the businesses nearby to see if we can find a spot that would work well for the program, but still not hinder the businesses. So I know we do that. I can't say we did it in every occasion. Apparently, from what you're hearing, it sounds like maybe we did not. So the intent is to do outreach, and we certainly are doing outreach. I just can't promise you that we did it everywhere. It sounds like you have an example of a location where perhaps we dropped the ball.
You do it everywhere, good. The business part is a gentleman who has a business over here by the shot tower. They installed a shared bike lane.
That's right.
I mean, a shared bike. Never knew nobody moved it from the front. They moved it to the back. He now can't have deliveries for his restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we sit and go back and forth. Is there going to be a better outreach in terms of the small business persons when you adding that bike shed around where their business is located?
What's the name of that business? Make sure we get do the right outreach, because we'll do that.
It's Silver Moon.
I'm sorry?
Silver Moon, right here by.
Silver Moon, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll reach out, see if we have to move something.
Thank you.
Councilman Henry.
Thank you. So, absent a police hold, how long are we required to keep an abandoned vehicle in our impound before we can legally dispose of it?
We notify the owners. We have a process for notifying the owners and giving them, I forget the time, but maybe 30 days after they receive it. I'm kind of guessing at that. I'll have to confirm that and let you know. It's not a long time.
Right.
As Chief Cason, she just informed me, we have to notify the owner, so it's usually about 45 days, as we think the estimate.
Including the 30 days they have to contact
right.
us.
That you are aware of, are private towers held to any different standard than we are?
Not that I'm aware of.
You mean if they tow off like a private lot that they're contracted with, how long do they have to dispose of the vehicle?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Don't know.
Okay, the reason I ask is I was approached by a guy that has a body shop, and we get complaints about the vehicles that just appear to sit on his lot forever, and his response was, it's become very difficult for them to legally dispose of a car that somebody brings him, and then they never come back to get it. And you guys are my first step in the due diligence on that. So, but as far as you're aware of, if a vehicle is abandoned, there's a notification that's required to be made, and you don't have to confirm receipt of the notification. You just have to send something.
If it's abandoned on city property, if it's abandoned on private property, that goes to housing and BMZA.
Okay, all right, I'll check with them next. All right.
And by the way, just so that if we get a complaint about an abandoned car in somebody's backyard, we have to go through housing to get authority to enter that private property to tow it.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, could I add to that really
Please.
quickly? And actually, Councilman, just so you know, because it's something that I'm looking at legislatively, if the vehicle is untagged and on private property, then housing doesn't even have the ability to ask them to go take it away. So we'll talk
But will
about
that pass muster with property rights? I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Oh, currently if it's
Yep,
not tagged?
yep, if it's untagged. We'll talk about it later.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple questions. The first two were related to parking citations and the speed cameras coming back online. And maybe this is a question more for finance, but so in both of those line items, there are projected increases. Well, for the speed cameras, there was a projected revenue of, I think, $5 million. And I saw that there's also a projected increase in parking citations. I just want to know the methodology behind predicting how many citations will issue in a year, especially for the camera program that isn't online yet.
I guess that was finance.
For the camera program, that includes speed cameras and red light cameras. The revenue we estimate is $8 million.
I'm sorry.
$3 million of that will cover administrative costs, and then $5 million is over and above administrative costs. And we worked with DOT. We look at how many cameras. We look at some historical data on because we've had cameras in the past, and looked at what kind of revenue they generate, and so that's what we use for our estimates. In terms of traffic citations, why don't I take that one as a follow-up, and I can provide the background on how we made those estimates.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you. And the second one.
I'm sorry, Councilman, was there
Yeah,
a get
the
back?
methodology for predicting revenue for traffic citations.
Methodology for predicting revenue for traffic
Parking
citations.
citations, right?
Parking citations, yeah.
Or parking citations. And that's number 24. Thank you. Sorry, Councilman.
And by the way, Mr. Klein has a very difficult job in trying to predict that. We all know you're going to have a pretty good crystal ball for
Yeah,
particularly the red light and speed camera revenue.
Yeah, I was just curious. And the second one I had was related to traffic management. It says, this is page 534, that only 34% of the traffic signals communicate with the traffic management center 90% or more of the time. Is there a way to improve that?
Something we've been working on for a couple of years, and we think we may have some, technology has turned the corner to a point where we have some opportunities. We've had a couple of meetings of late with some vendors that have some thoughts for us. Just to give you a little bit of idea what that's about, there are a number of signals that have physical infrastructure to them, but it's difficult to keep old cables reliable. We've replaced a lot of them in a lot of areas, but there's still a lot more to do. There are other signals that were built in more outlying areas that never had physical connection, were never intended to be linked back in the day whenever they were built, maybe 50, 60 years ago. What we are looking at now is how we use wireless technology. We're starting to do it now. We put some detectors down in the southeast Baltimore to try to help us get some synchronization of signals down there, including signals that we didn't have communications to. And what we have is some devices that were embedded into the pavement that allow us to keep the time clocks, which each signal controller has, in sync so that they don't drift and then you get out of sequence. We're talking, but right now it's sort of the discussion stage about some other ideas. For example, there are opportunities to get devices and signals that will track Wi-Fi signals of passing cars to give you some ideas of origin and destinations, as well as devices that can do counting for us. So we've got a lot of ideas, but that number is probably right in terms of a lot of signals that we have that we don't have communications to. Now, the controllers work on their own. They don't have to be connected as long as the time clocks don't drift. But obviously, we have more opportunities if we have that communication.
And I do just have one follow-up in terms of the actual for fiscal 2016. The reason why it's low was there was a fire in one of the conduits, and it burned out a bunch of our cables, which means they couldn't communicate.
Yeah, usually we were closer to 50%.
Okay. In the last, sorry, I'm bouncing around here, but I had little notes written in the books. I'm trying to get to all of them. The last was it related to footway repairs. So I did a walkthrough in one of my neighborhoods that has some pretty terrible sidewalks with one of your staff members who indicated that we could put it in, but there would be approximately a 7-year backlog of repairs.
That's the backlog that we now have.
7 years.
Yeah, and one of the things, just to make sure everybody's aware, is by, I guess it's code or charter, the footway repairs are the financial responsibility of the adjacent property owner. We can do the work, but then they will get billed for it, just like alleys. The alleys are partially responsible. The adjacent property owners are partly responsible. So we always tell people, be careful what you wish for. If you want us to come look at the sidewalks, we have to do the whole block because we don't want to go out and look at one property and pretend we don't see anybody else. So sometimes that stimulates some pushback when people say, why did I get this violation notice?
Okay.
But yeah, there is a number of years backlog, unfortunately, because of the limited funds we get.
So
And
it's primarily a funding issue?
Yeah, and our CIP this year, the highway user revenues that we get were cut by 30% over last year. And that's the same shrinking pot that we have to fund things like sidewalk repairs out of.
Okay, thank you.
Frank, if you recall, last summer maybe we had an issue with notifications being sent out for public meetings, and I know you were going to speak with the municipal post office. I'm just wondering.
About the timing.
Yeah, I kind of dropped the ball on that. I'm wondering, did anything come of that, or if
I know
you
we had
recall if that's-
conversations in-house. I got to find out where we left that because our liaisons, of course, take that
Okay,
lead.
if you could follow up with the committee on that, just the result of discussions with the municipal post office. And that is number 25. Thank you. Councilman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Murphy, actually, I want to, with my first question, dovetail onto what my colleague was just talking about when we're talking about alleyways and things like that. Is there anything that prohibits us from putting those kind of funds in the general budget, from general fund allocation?
We don't control the funding.
Say again?
Availability of funds that DOT gets through the CIP, that's the
No, I'm
control.
saying, I get that, but for example, just like this year we're putting $6 million more into the circulator, couldn't we say, hey, we're going to put $2 million more into, because as you know, and as everyone in DOT knows, is something very important to me, it's not just alleyways and sidewalks that come out of that, right?
Slab repairs.
If you have a street that's concrete and it's a slab repair street, it has to come out of that same amount of very limited funding, which is just as important. If you're a citizen, that's just as important as the funding for milling and paving, because they don't know the difference. Only those of us inside of this side of this building know the difference. So my question is, could we, just like we do milling and paving, put money in the general funds to be allocated for that use?
Well, we do. That we take a piece of what we get and allocate it to alleys, allocate it to footways, allocate it to slab repair.
Yes, sir.
And in fact, you might recall, we bumped up the slab repair numbers a few years ago
Yes, sir.
specifically for that reason. So we can, it just means it has to come out of something else.
So you're saying you just need more money to do it, right?
Right.
All right, good. That's the answer I was hoping for. And then, and my next one is about Service 688, snow and ice control. I want to first start again by saying that the last now 4 years of snow removal have been the best that I've ever seen in my life in the city of Baltimore. So kudos to everyone who's been doing it. And I also, Mr. Klein, am very appreciative again to see that we're actually allocating a better amount of dollars so that we don't avoid us having to come back with lots of supplementals and as we did in previous years. But my question, Mr. Murphy, is can you provide for the council a breakdown of the funding for the snow and ice control, like what's DOT based versus contractor based, and what contractors work when snow removal happens?
Let me let Lindsay take it.
In terms of the monetary breakdown, I can follow up with the exact numbers, but like this current fiscal year, about $2.6 million worth of work was done by the contractors.
Yep.
About 1.1 million was salt purchasing, about $500,000 fleet. So it's kind of all over the place. And we have our costs that we expend during snow and then the ones kind of before to get everything ready. The other big expense that we had that you wouldn't necessarily see budgeted out here is we bought for about $360,000 20 brine applicators now that we have the new brine facility. But we can follow up with kind of that breakdown of kind of big categories.
So that's number 26, and that's just a breakdown of what we've spent. Is that for just this previous year, Councilman?
Yeah, just this previous year, or if they allocate it out in a specific way in the budget for the next year.
Yeah, I can do a breakdown of this current fiscal year and then what it's broken down for 2018.
So that'd be like supplies, equipment, fleet, salt, contractors versus city.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
And by the way, thanks for the kudos on the snow. And if the one person that probably probably more responsibility than anybody else is Mr. Ching, who's sitting in the back row.
I just want to second that, what Councilman Scott said about the snow removal. You were a rock star this year. Thank you, Kenny. Councilwoman Sneed.
Yes, thank you. So we've been getting a number of calls in reference to Baltimore and like Ann Street with the studies that's been done. And so I'm wondering how many studies, how many questions, concerns do you get for studies from each community or each year? How many do you get?
Wow.
And then
That's a good question.
Yeah, because every time I go to a community meeting, I'm saying we got to bring in Department of Transportation for a study because they want stop signs at a location that sometimes makes sense to me, but we don't know until we bring you all in. And so it seems like we do all these studies. I'm wondering how long for each study, and then how long it takes to actually get a stop sign or a stop light up.
Well, let me
is it based
take
on
a
cost again?
Let me take a crack on that a little bit. The length of the study, there's two factors in terms of length of what it takes to do a study. If we do a signal study, that's a little more involved. That includes crash data and traffic volumes and the like. We do that for stop sign studies to a degree as well. Part of the problem is like Baltimore and Ann's a little bit puzzling to me because when you go out and look at the intersection, there's nothing inherently weird about it that would tend to produce problems the way sometimes you can go to an intersection and say it's on a funny skew or they can't see or some things are kind of obvious. In my mind, that's not so much the case at Baltimore and Ann. We looked at crash data for Baltimore and Ann. The numbers are very low, at least for reported crashes, and that's really all we usually get to go on. We had up through 2014 relatively no numbers. We got 2015, there was 0 on 2015. So the numbers aren't suggesting that there's a problem, but clearly the community has issues with it. So that one sometimes is a little more challenging when the typical things don't lead you to a solution. When they do, it's obviously quicker. So it sort of depends on the conditions. It depends on if there's some obvious problem. And that one's been a little vexing for us so far. It didn't meet signal warrants. It wouldn't be an appropriate candidate for a stop sign on a main street like Baltimore Street. So that one's got us pulling our hair out a little bit as to what is the really main problem that has to be fixed and what's the fix. So I guess I didn't really answer your question, but except to say it depends on the conditions and what kind of studies are being done.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any more questions for DOT? Frank, Lindsay, Connor, everyone, thank you very much. Appreciate everything you guys are doing. We are going to, can you, any of the follow-up, if you could please send to Marguerite. And then we have you for, I know Pat is out today with a family emergency. We have you tomorrow from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m., and that is as part of a panel. We obviously don't expect your entire team to come down, so if you just want to send Pat or whoever his backup is, as well as whoever's responsible for mowing the grass. That's been a big theme today. Let me double check to make sure we don't have anything else with you guys. And we're good. So thank you very much. We are going to go into recess until 3:30. At that time, we have retirement services, which will be our first panel. Employees retirement system, fire and police employees retirement system, elected officials retirement system. That's at 3:30 sharp.